Okay. Welcome to Beyond the Scale Through Healing. If you have been there before, thanks for coming back. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Today, I have the immense pleasure to welcome Bart K, who is very famous in the carnivore community. And I would like first to thank you, Bart, for being there with me today.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure.
Can I ask you to start just to give a very quick background about your story and about how you ended being low carb and carnivore?
Yeah, it's I started a ketogenic style of nutrition, 27 years ago. Way back before it was kind of hip and cool and the thing. I did it because I did some research into it and it made sense to me. And I had had some health problems throughout my whole life prior to that I thought the keto diet had a chance of helping me with. And so I thought, right, dive in both feet, give the thing a try, which I did. And I did that for about 20 years because it did resolve many of my problems to about the 80% level, give or take. Never 100. It wasn't until it was about 8 years ago now that somebody first suggested that I was aware of on the internet that carnivore might be a good idea, completely carnivore. Of course, that was crazy. That was too far out of left field or whatever it was. I'd never even really thought or considered that maybe human beings are actually designed by selection pressure to be fully carnivorous. I had just sucked down the line that we were supposed to be at least partially omnivorous because that's what we're all taught. And I'd never really challenged that so much. So anyway, I thought, well, again, if you're going to try something, do it properly. So I did it as properly as I could do. And I was probably 90 to 95% carnivore for the last 8 years. And that got me to sort of maybe 90, 95% of the health problems resolved. And so I've just continued to do it. And in the last 4 years, I have given up my previous profession of being an academic and teaching in universities around the place. And I've become a YouTube channel creator and an influencer, I guess, of some ill repute, as you quite rightly say. And so I've been promoting it publicly ever since, pretty much because it works. It is correct as far as I can see from all my understandings of it. The anecdotes are all good. And so that's pretty much the story into it, really.
What was your field of expertise when you were at the university?
Yeah, I started my career, my first qualification, postgraduate qualification anyway, was in the physiology of rest and exercise. It's the kind of thing they used to just call sports science.
Okay.
Specializing in physiology rather than biomechanics or the motivation of sport or any of that kind of stuff. And then I sort of taught that for around 7 or 8 years, give or take. Then I branched out into human nutrition from there and got another qualification there and started specializing there for a while and doing research in that field for a while. And then from there, in the last bit of my academic career, I actually branched out again and went into cardiovascular pathophysiology, which is why do we get heart disease?
Okay.
Basically. So they're the kind of 3 areas I've taught in. And then overarching all of that is a very well-developed understanding of pure and applied statistics, statistical inference, research design, and all that kind of thing. So I kind of come from really all of those angles when I'm talking about physiology, health, nutrition, and what the science can and cannot tell us, what inferences are good statistically, scientifically, and which ones are a bit dodgy, shall we say. Yeah.
So it's really easy to find on your channel the influencer that you think are a little bit dodgy. But currently on the carnivore diet, which one do you think are the one to listen to?
Who are the people to listen to?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that Dr. Sean Baker is pretty spot on. I think Dr. Anthony Chaffee is pretty spot on. I have a lot of respect for Dr. Ken Berry.
That's 3 big names.
Yeah, that pretty much for me would be my go-to guys. I was trying to think of some of the ladies that I would absolutely go to as well. Pim Johnson, obviously, my lovely partner. I would absolutely go to her for advice
I had the pleasure to speak with Pim like 1 month ago. She's amazing.
Yeah. So Pim has two fairly serious qualifications. One is in human nutrition and one is in biomedical science. And she these days has branched out herself and is now in the field of helping people with addictive eating, addictive behavior, mainly around sugar and carbohydrates. So I would absolutely go to her for any advice and help on those kind of things. I think that Bella from the Steak and Butter Gang is pretty spot on as well. Although she generally tends to leave most of the coaching to her staff, if you like, of coaches that work out of the Steak and Butter Gang, which is great. Look, there are many, many people that we could mention. We'll be here all day trying to sort of sit through and think of who they all are. Because when you're on the spot, you're like, your brain goes, So there you go. There's just a few.
Yeah. And going through these people, okay, you spoke about Dr. Chappie, Dr. Baker, Dr. Kenberry, and those doctors are staying away most of the time from the trend. And in the carnivore community, the ladies, mostly the pre or postmenopausal ladies, are going through all the trends that are going out. And one of the last trends was the 80-20, 4 meals a day, very low protein, even less than 80-20. And I would like today to have your thought about this. And what do you think of this type of carnivore diet?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the first thing I would say personally about that is that if something is working for you and has demonstrably been working for you for 8 to 12 months and there are no ill effects, I would say that's a thing that's not broken and therefore does not need fixing. If, however, you're in the stage of experimenting a bit, trying things a bit, seeing if this works, seeing if that works, and it's not trending towards or looking like it's going to be the answer for you, don't be afraid to get another opinion and talk to somebody else about how they think one might approach the situation. The postmenopausal woman has slightly different needs nutritionally, absolutely, to a premenopausal woman or a man. And sure, there are individual things that need to be taken into account as well. That said, it seems to me, from my experience, that most people don't really fall much away from about 5 to 7% either side of 75-25 in terms of the macros. 75 fat, 25 protein.
Okay.
So 80-20 it's at the far end of that where people what tends to work for them. So that's why I said if you are, whether you're a postmenopausal woman or not, actually, if you are a person for whom 80-20 works, great. I wouldn't necessarily fix it because it's not broken if it's working for you. But if I was advising a person one-on-one, I would sit down with them and talk to them over at least an hour and find out what's going on and what, and come up with a customized plan, if you like, although it's not going to be a huge variation on that theme for most people.
Yeah. The problem I've seen with this was that it started like decrease your protein, increase your fat, and look at your numbers, check your numbers all the time to see if you regulate your insulin and if your blood ketones are going up. And checking those numbers, there was no stop. It was always to reach higher ketones and lower the blood glucose even more and more. And to do so, they started eating 80-20 4 meals a day with 25 grams of protein each meal. So you end at the end of the day around 100 grams of protein, which is not too low. But then slightly, we saw that it was mainly 3 meals a day instead of 4, and even reducing the protein down to 50-60 grams of protein. And I was a little bit scared about this 50-60 grams of protein per day, because I'm fully convinced that when you're aging, you need even more protein than when you're very young, if you want to have muscle synthesis quite.
Yeah, correct. I made the assumption that the macronutrient split is made on the basis that we start with how much protein a person needs, and we fill the rest of the energy intake from fats. But first we work out the protein needs, and the difference between 75-25 and 80-20 is not a different amount of protein. It's more or less fat. The amount of protein a person needs ranges between 1.75 to around about 2.0 grams of protein per lean kilogram of body mass.
And in this 80-20 trend, it's more like 1.4 grams maximum.
Yeah, that is not enough protein for anybody.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you.
Yeah.
And I don't really feel good. I tried it to see what was about, but I cannot sustain on this low protein. I need more.
So if you're eating around 1.4 grams of protein, anybody, a man, woman, child, pre-menopausal, post-menopausal, if you're eating that little protein, please increase your protein to at least 1.75 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. Merci beaucoup. Taxameki, get that done today.
Yeah, I really agree with
you. And then work out how much fat you need to make out the rest of your so-called caloric intake for the day from there, or on the percentage wise. And you can work very, very grossly, very roughly off 4 so-called calories per gram of protein. Not correct in terms of actual measurement. We'll get to that later when we talk about calories and stuff. I know we're going to talk about that, so that'll be fun. And around about 9 calories per gram of fat. So if you need to work out how much food that is, that's how you do that. Keep in mind that this is just a gauge to help you get an idea of the amount of mass of food. This is not a means to determine how much effective energy you are getting from it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll cover that a bit later on. So that's how that one works out.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to jump on it about counting the calories. I had a past eating disorder, and I was counting the calories as crazy. I was even counting the calories in the sugar-free gums, so you can imagine how bad it was. And I've been restricted for 3 decades. When I switched to carnivore, I stopped counting anything. I don't count my food. I just make sure that I'm eating enough, so I don't have a day with less than 2,500 calories. That's the only thing I want, not to go back down the slope. But it's most of the time totally instinctive, and I don't count about the calories. And when people are trying to lose weight, or because we can see mainly at this time, they are always checking the calorie amount. They very often undereat, because it's really easy to undereat on carnivore, I think, because you're so satisfied and satiated by your meal that you can undereat. And they are trying to make a calorie deficit. So what are your thoughts about the calories in, calories out, and how should we use the calories?
Right. What people need to understand from the ground up, if they want to start using calories as any kind of tool in nutrition, you need to understand what a calorie is. Obviously, I would have thought. A calorie, as it turns out, is a measurement of the change in temperature of a bath of water of a certain volume, which surrounds a closed chamber in which a substance, a sample of a piece of food is rapidly combusted completely using a large electrical current to basically vaporize it, releasing the heat from vaporizing that sample, the heat being made of photons of light of a certain wavelength. Those then go out from the combustion point, heat the walls of the chamber, and then the walls of the chamber pass that heat off to the water surrounding it, and it goes up in temperature by a certain amount. That is what a calorie is. That is the only thing a calorie is. It is not a measurement of energy. Energy is a construct. It's a concept. It's an idea. There is no externally valid scientific definition available of what is energy, except that scientists who study these things say energy is the capacity to do work. And then you say, great, what is work? Work is a force applied over a given distance. Okay, what is a force? It's the thing that gives impetus to change in momentum. Okay, what is it? So we just follow this rabbit hole. You don't actually end up getting anything but a circular definition. As it turns out, the concept of energy is much like the concept of currency, of money. I cannot go into a delicatessen in France and buy my fresh carnivore meat from the delicatessen by handing them my New Zealand dollars.
Of course.
They will not accept that. That is not money. It is in New Zealand, in the context of being in New Zealand, it's money, and I can go and buy things at the shop with it. But at the same token, I can't pay the delicatessen in New Zealand in francs. They won't accept them. That's not money. It's still currency. So currency is the construct, the concept. Money is the actual reality. And it depends on context. So if you take the concept of energy, if you say a calorie is a measurement of energy, number one, you're wrong. But number two, okay, let's just accept that for fun and say, fine, it is. Yes, it's energy in a certain construct, in a certain context. That context is heat. the kind of energy that will warm something up. Okay. Does the human body run on heat? Can you absorb heat and use that for metabolic process? No, you cannot. The way the body encapsulates energy to do metabolic work is chemical, not heat. Whoops. We have a disconnect between what we're told is a valid construct and what really is. When I give that argument, the charlatans, the clowns who believe in calories in, calories out as a robust, valid and scientific way of looking at things, the first thing they will say is, oh, you obviously don't understand thermodynamics, is what they'll say. And then they'll say, the first law of thermodynamics is what we're talking about here. Energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from form to form. All energy can be changed from one currency to another, just like you can go to the bank and change your dollars for francs or your francs for dollars. What are you talking about, you silly bald man, is what they say to me. To which I say, fantastic. Which law of thermodynamics are you referring to as that relates to the human body and its need for energy? And they say, well, obviously, the first law of thermodynamics, to which I usually respond, fantastic. Would you like to quote that for me? What is the first law of thermodynamics? I've had 3 opportunities lately to talk to so-called experts in the field about this and to ask them that question, either directly, face-to-face, electronically, or by way of a tit-for-tat video exchange, his video, my video, his video, my video sort of thing. On each of those 3 occasions, the so-called expert could not accurately quote to me what the first law of thermodynamics is, what it says, and how it applies, or in fact, as it turns out, does not apply in the construct or the context of the human body. They'll all say things like, oh, energy can't be created or destroyed. It can only be changed from form to form, when I ask them to quote the first law of thermodynamics. Well, that's not the first law of thermodynamics. That's the law of conservation of energy, which is a different thing altogether. If you want to know what the first law of thermodynamics says, I'll tell you. It says the change in internal energy of a closed thermodynamic system is equal to the specific heat energy in that system minus any work done by that system. Is there any mention of mass in there at all?
No.
No. Mass is explicitly excluded from that law of thermodynamics, both in the actual mathematical formulation of the law and in the English verbiage version I've just given you. It's excluded explicitly. And that's why I said the change in internal energy of a closed thermodynamic system is what the law describes, because the human body is able to exchange both heat, energy, and mass, as well as to do work.
Yeah.
That is an open thermodynamic system. Ergo, the first law of thermodynamics does not apply to the human body. And anyone that says it does not understand physics or thermodynamics or common sense. Your body composition, the makeup of your body, the weight of each of the individual separate components of that body mass, water, muscle, viscera, skeleton, all of those different things that make up your overall weight, they can all be moderated independently as well as somewhat interdependently, which then makes up your overall mass at the end of the day. Each of those components of your overall mass is just that. It's mass. Your body composition is a mass balance exercise, not an energy balance exercise.
Yeah.
First law of thermodynamics. Goodness me. Yeah. So that's that one in a nutshell.
Yeah. So what's your recommendation for people to eat? They have to understand how much energy they need and how much food that represents, and then go with it and adapt depending of their feelings or what's.
Okay, the most powerful, most accurate tool available to you to manage your intakes for the vast majority of people. It doesn't work for everybody. Nothing does. For the vast majority of people, your hunger and satiety signaling is very, very accurate. It knows how much mass of, and hence effective energy in the form of fat and protein you've eaten.
Yeah.
When you eat fat and protein, your body is programmed to stop you when it's had enough of those things. There are hormone-like and actual hormone and second messenger and all sorts of signals and chemical things that go on in the body that tell you, gosh, I'm hungry now. I could eat some meat and fat. Nom, 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 nom. Now I'm full. Perhaps I'll stop.
Yeah.
The human body has been communicating with us in this way and telling us how much to eat and when to stop for as long as human beings have walked the earth, which is thought to be around about, give or take, 350,000 years. And indeed, the same thing was true in our forebears that were nearly human, but not quite, so proto-humans. That was also true in those early hominins, whatever, back about 4.5 million years. You will not see a cave painting of human beings walking around with calculators or punching things into chronometer in their computers to make sure they're eating the right number of calories. In fact, they didn't even know what calories were or what even the concept was.
Yeah. Keto mojo to pinch their fingers.
Or whatever it is, chronometer, keto mojo, whatever it is, all of these different things that track things and tell you you've been a good boy or a good girl. And yes, you've got it right. For a start, these things will estimate how much energy you require in calories on a daily basis based on totally insufficient information to even attempt that calculation. Most of these systems will ask you your age, your gender, your height, your weight, and then it will ask you to estimate your activity level chronically on a scale of usually 1 to 5.
Yeah.
That is not going to tell you how much your individual energy requirements genuinely in effect really are. It's always going to be an estimate with a huge gap. Then they're going to say, well, this is how many calories you need, which is a joke as in terms of what we've just discussed. Then you're going to go and read nutrition labels that tell you how many calories there are in various amounts of different foods so you can plan your menu and make sure that Chronometer or Mojo tells you that's okay. Only here's the next problem. The labels on the food that tells you how much energy is in it, in calories or kilojoules, doesn't matter, are allowed by law in most countries to be off by 20% either direction. So it's a range of 40% error is allowable by law on the labels. Whoops. Dear, oh dear. However, your body chemistry, assuming that yours is working reasonably well, and it is for most people, does not miss by that much. It's pretty spot on in terms of, I'm hungry, I need energy, put some in, mass, food. Now I've got enough. Now that you've eaten 7/8 of what was on your plate, it doesn't know that. Your body, your eyes know that, your brain knows that, you can intellectualize that and be aware of it consciously. Your body doesn't know what's left on your plate. And and when it says stop at 7/8 of your food eaten, here's what you should do. Stop. And if you eat everything on your plate and you go, geez, I'm still hungry, guess what you should do? Have some more. Keep eating. Get some more food. What's messed this up for us in the last 10,000 years, most notably, and even more so in the last 100, because of all sorts of other things that have changed in the way humans live, it's carbohydrates and seed oils. And also highly refined foods, highly palatable foods, the addition of things like extra monosodium glutamate and flavor enhancers of other kinds, artificial colors, all sorts of chemical crap that they put into so-called food that has messed up this body chemistry so that we don't have the satiety signaling. So if you want your body chemistry to work and your satiety signaling to know how much mass of food, energy of food, however you want to think about it, you need and when to stop, what you need to do is to correct your diet so that it is in line with the species appropriate and species specific diet. And the way to do that is pretty simple. Eliminate everything from your diet that is a plant, was a plant, or came from a plant, or was any part of a plant. Eat meat and associated animal fat, period. Caveat, don't listen to this interview and go, that made a lot of sense. I'm going to go carnivore tomorrow and do that overnight. Mistake. Don't do that. You need to change your diet slowly over 6 to 8 weeks in order to let your body adjust and your microbiota adjust. If you change your diet hugely overnight, you are asking for a problem and you will almost certainly get one. Okay?
Okay. I've been transitioning to carnivore cold turkey and I didn't get problems. But
okay, you're lucky.
Yeah. I'm considering myself as lucky. Yeah. I can see that sometimes the transition is more difficult, and because the transition is more difficult, then it's a fail because they are not feeling good and they are facing too many problems. And so, maybe stepping back slowly into carnivore is.
If you have changed your diet and you're X number of weeks or months down the track, I would not suggest a person should go back and do it, add some plant and carb and stuff back in and then take it out. That fork in the road's gone. That was back there. You've gone that way. Okay, fine. You've done that. You may get away with it immediately. You may get away with it medium term. Often people will experience some kind of problem 6-8 months after they've done it. Not everybody. You might get away with it completely. You might not have any problems at all. And good luck to you, whoever you may be out there. But I still strongly suggest that changing your diet from anything to anything else overnight, very suddenly, not good.
Yeah. And as I said, I changed cold turkey, but I was not eating any kind of very highly processed food. I was not eating the cookies, the crap like this. So maybe it has been steps done before. Yeah. But I've been on this road for 1.5 years and I'm feeling amazing. Okay, and I want step back.
I think the risk, after 1.5 years, if you haven't had any problems, I think the risk of one developing at this point is pretty minimal. I would say you've got away with it and good luck to you.
Yeah, I have to stay on it forever. But, when you're feeling the way I'm feeling now, you don't want to step back.
Exactly. Yeah, why would you go back?
So once you connected again with your body signals, what became a typical day of eating for you?
Okay, for me, when I'm being fully adherent, 100% adherent, which I go through periods of doing, it is the muscle meat of usually beef, the associated fat that came with that muscle meat and around the edge of that muscle meat, an additional slab of butter, usually, salt to taste, and often 2 or 3 teaspoons, maybe slightly more, of unsweetened Greek yogurt with sometimes a very small amount of finely diced garlic in it because I enjoy it. Once a day, in an appropriate amount to subserve my hunger satiety signaling, which is pretty consistent on a day-by-day basis. So therefore, the amount of food, I can now do that entirely visually. There it is. That's about right. Perfect. Let's go. However, if I do get to the point of satiety and there's maybe 1 or 2 mouthfuls left on the plate, that goes in the refrigerator and I eat it later. I never, ever force food in the general course of a day. Other than that, fluids are water, pretty much. That is it.
Okay. And so you're eating only once a day?
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking it's the way to go, or it's better to skip?
I do personally, for me, and also, again, for the vast majority of people, but not everybody. There are reasons and case by case why someone would not eat once a day. They would need to eat twice or more for various reasons. Very individual. I would counsel those people accordingly in a one-on-one consultancy situation. But as a rule of thumb, as a generalization, most people do very well at 1 meal a day. Several reasons.
And no snacking in between, like fatty coffee or stuff like that.
Well, I could have snacks, but in between what? There's 1 meal.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. The reason I don't snack so much, if at all, is because if I eat the right amount of food in my 1 meal a day, I am not hungry again until about the same time the next day at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So several reasons why 1 meal a day works well. Number one, the reason I've just said, satiety lasts 24 hours on that for me and for most people. Number two, it gives your body the maximum amount of time to repair itself from the damage done by eating. Even a perfect carnivore diet causes an inflammatory response as a matter of course. The digestive system has to renew and repair and replace cells that are sloughed off in the process. There's a bunch of things that the body has to get done, and it doesn't need you pouring in another food insult while it's still getting the last one sorted.
Yeah.
It minimizes the time during the day that you are in an inflammatory situation. It's got to be good.
Yeah. Regarding to this, at one point of your day, do you prefer to take your meal?
Whatever works for the individual person is fine with me. I don't think it's that important, except that I believe food should be taken when the sun is in the sky.
Okay.
I don't think you should eat after dark, personally. Personally, for me, it tends to be between about 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. That's just when it works for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't do OMAD. Most of the time I'm doing 2 MADs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not against experimenting, to see if I feel better or.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen is if I'm eating like a very big meal, then the couple of hours after this, I'm not really efficient.
Yeah.
And so if I'm eating, what I'm scared about doing this is if I'm having this big meal in my working office,
Mhm.
I won't be really efficient at the office for the 10 hours following or
Sure.
stuff like that.
Sure.
So it should be after my working time, and I rarely come back home before 8.
Mhm.
So it will be already nighttime.
Right.
So I'm wondering how I could fix this on a full-time job. And
Okay. Well, the two approaches are to split your nutrition and have 2 meals a day, which is what it sounds like you're doing.
Yeah.
Or change your occupation.
yeah, but this is difficult, you know.
Sure,
I'm a
it's not
single
easy.
mom.
I'm not suggesting it's easy. It's easy to throw it out there. And, you know, I'm being a bit glib, obviously, but conceptually it's that simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm a single mom with a 10-year-old kid, and if I don't have any income, so I'm not sure.
I didn't say stop working. I said change your occupation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But obviously, if, you know, that's fairly extreme. If you wanted seriously, resolutely to be OMAD and you wanted to adhere to not eating after dark, then your option becomes you have to change your occupation because your current occupation does not allow that. I would suggest you a more sensible, more rational, more simple line of least resistance on that one is exactly what you are doing. Oh, that's why I said earlier that there are individual reasons why someone might not. There you go. Also, let's say someone who may have been eating disordered and may have been, for example, anorexic or bulimic or any of those kind of conditions, I would not ask someone like that to eat 1 meal a day, probably not until at least 2 or 3 years after they've got full resolution of the disordered eating and the eating disorder, or at least it's under control. Just an example.
It has been my journey, you know, recovery from restrictive eating disorder. So I consider myself healed now.
Excellent.
Because I'm not fearing any food, except I'm fearing carbs. And I won't add carbs at any point in my diet because I think that was my main issue. So, yeah.
Cool bananas.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Speaking about carbs, can you explain to my audience what is the Randall cycle and why it's better to stay away from them?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so the Randall cycle is an overall umbrella term, actually, for a number of components of your metabolic pathway, both physical structures and organelles and how they interact within cells, and also parts of the actual metabolic machinery, the biochemical reactions, the enzymes, how this interacts with that, how this affects that, the knock-on effects through your metabolic process. Basically, in a nutshell, in less than a minute for dummies version, what the Randall cycle basically is what it says, or the effect of it overall, is that if you eat carbohydrates and fat together in your diet, even if they're separated by a number of hours, it makes no difference. If you have both fat and carbohydrate in your diet, in terms of the oxidation of those food substances to provide for the metabolic energy, the ATP, the fat will discourage the oxidation of the carbohydrate, and the carbohydrate will discourage the oxidation of the fat. Think of fat and carbohydrates as two fat men trying to push their way through a doorway at once, and neither one can get through. That is the Randall cycle when it's activated negatively by eating carbohydrates and fats together in the diet. If you eat just fats, the fats will happily line up in single file and walk through that doorway. If you consume nothing but carbohydrates and protein, so fat and protein versus carbohydrate and protein, the carbohydrate and protein side of the coin, the carbohydrates will also march through that door. However, the cell environment itself, the cell fluid, the organelles in the cell, the proteins in the cell, are all quite sensitive to damage to those physical structures, those proteins, the enzymes, the organelles, the DNA itself are all quite susceptible to damage from too much glucose, which is the form of carbohydrates that we consume in that way. As such, carbohydrate is only allowed to enter the cell in order to line up at all at a maximum rate, precisely to keep the concentration of glucose inside a cell below that damaging level or below some threshold level, which is actually variable in the cell. It goes up and down. And the way that the cell manages that is by turning up and down the sensitivity of the receptor and the transporter that gets sugar from the outside of the cell to the inside of the cell. And that's also part of the Randall cycle and its effect.
Okay.
So too much carbohydrate will cause a Randall cycle problem. Too much fat doesn't seem to have any real effect on the Randall cycle per se at all.
Okay.
Any mixture of carbohydrate and fat and significant amounts of both will immediately, hugely be problematic in terms of this negative effect of the Randall cycle. And here's what it is. Number one, the cell is actually starving because nothing can get through because of those two fat men trying to go through the doorway. So the redox potential of the cell, the energy within the cell, the pH balance in the cell will all be disturbed by that. And that cell will now be inflamed and set off pro-inflammatory cytokines and set off a system of inflammation. So that's the first problem. Why is that a problem? Well, if you're chronically inflamed, chronic inflammation is the root cause, is the underpinning reason why people get obese or tend to gain too much fat. It's the reason for heart disease. Nothing to do with cholesterol, nothing to do with saturated fat at all. It is inflammation that causes heart disease. Most forms of cancer, most forms of dementia, and both type 1 and type 2 diabetes are made much more likely in that situation. All the big killers, basically, of people before their time, all underpinned by inflammation, which is in itself underpinned by Randall cycle abuse, if you like.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what the real problem is in a nutshell, in short. I've done a number of videos about the Randall cycle on my channel. If folks want to look into it a bit more deeply and check out some interviews I've done with others who know more about it as well. And, well, not more than myself, but more than the average person. Because basically, given that Sir Philip Randall that proposed the thing is no longer with us, I would consider myself to be one of the world experts in the field of Randall cycle. As it turns out, at least in the YouTube community and the online talking about nutrition and health community, prior to me starting to talk about this about 4 years ago, no one was talking about it. No one was even aware of it at all, as far as I can tell. And if you look at the published research literature on this topic, pretty soon after Randall proposed the thing and published his seminal paper on it, it went quiet, and it remained quiet until relatively recently, the last few years. And the reason for that is because it was pushed under the carpet for political reasons in science. And it was because basically the Randall cycle was erosive to the foundation of what Ancel Keys was trying to put forward with you should avoid fat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Ancel Keys had a huge, a lot of power in science at that time. This is around about the 1960s as all this happened. And he had a great sort of ability to garner support around himself in the scientific community. And actually, he was a bully in a big way. So that's why that happened. Anyway, that's the Randall cycle in a nutshell.
Yeah. So thank you so much for all this information. And as you were thinking about your channel, and before we end this conversation, I wanted to ask you, you've got tons of video on your channel. If I should pick up the 2 or 3 main videos you will recommend me to watch?
It really depends on what a person's specific interest in nutrition, health, fitness is as to what they might want to watch. People that watch I've actually got a number of YouTube channels with slightly different styles to try and suit different viewers, because my main channel, which is called Bart K Health Science, that channel is quite sweary. I'm quite abrasive. I swear at people who want to put forward misinformation about health and nutrition to people. It's deliberate. It's for clicks. It's for notoriety. It works really well. A lot of people like it. A lot of people support it and follow it. So I'm going to keep doing that. A lot of people hate that. They don't like that at all. For those people, I have another channel called the Institute of Health Science Integrity, which is all professorial. It's all suit and tie. It's all, here is the science. Thank you very much. No swearing, no silly nonsense, no character acting, none of that. I have a third channel, which is called the Meat Militia, which is kind of a comedy channel. It's kind of a bit of a hoot. It does have some information on it, but it's mostly about playing silly buggers, frankly. So they're the 3 main channels. Have a good look around, see what you like, find what suits you, what doesn't. There's a number of videos available there on the YouTube platform. Also, it's kind of like a repository. All my videos are pretty much available on an Odyssey platform I've got running as well. So if you go to the Odyssey video platform service and look for Bart K Nutrition Science Watchdog channel, there's, I think, nearly 1,200 videos there, right back from the beginning, of all sorts of different styles, mostly quite sweary, I will tell you. But that's all there for you. So, I mean, topics I've covered are, what is the optimal human diet? What is the anthropology that supports that? Why are the vegans completely wrong? Why are they actually dangerous misanthropes that need to stop doing that and promoting that diet? What causes heart disease for real and what doesn't? And a lot of videos critiquing other people's videos where they're wrong. It's a series I call Who's Wrong on the Interwebs, basically. So that's where that is. All of those links I can send to you to put underneath your video.
Sure.
I'll also, obviously, on my version of the video, put them on underneath as well, so people can click directly on those and go and find that stuff. In the meantime, I do have to run because I've got another client hour now. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
Not at all. I really do appreciate the opportunity to share with a wider audience. I hope people got something from it. And if you did, please do subscribe to all my channels and stuff, and look for me on social media. Just Google me. You can't miss me. I'm everywhere.
Yeah.